Hello and welcome to the Bible with Brisco. I am your host, Shendo Brisco, and today we will be covering Leviticus 4 through 5 and Matthew 24, 29 through 51. Father, I just ask for clarity of voice and recognition so that the reading of your word will be a blessing to you and to those who are tuned in today. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. And they all said, amen. The sin offering, Leviticus 4. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, when anyone sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, if the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt upon the people, he must bring to the Lord a young bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he has committed. He is to present the bull at the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on its head and slaughter it there before the Lord. Then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and carry it into the tent of meeting. He is to dip his fingers into the blood and sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord, in front of the curtain of the sanctuary. The priest shall then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense, that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. The rest of the bull's blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offerings at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He shall remove all of the fat from the bull of the sin offering, all the fat that is connected to the internal organs, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys, just as the fat is removed from the ox sacrificed for a fellowship offering. Then the priest shall burn them on the altar of burnt offering. But the hide of the bull and all its flesh, as well as the head and legs, the internal organs and the intestines, that is, all of the rest of the bull, he must take outside the camp to a place ceremonially clean, where the ashes are thrown, and burn it there in a wood fire on the ash heap. If the whole Israelite community sins again unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, even though the community is unaware of the matter, when they realize their guilt and the sin they committed becomes known, the assembly must bring a young bull as a sin offering, and the priest is to and present it before the tent of meeting. The elders of the community are to lay their hands on the bull's head before the Lord, and the bull shall be slaughtered before the Lord. Then the anointed priest, who is to take some of the bull's blood into the tent of meeting, he shall dip his fingers into the blood, and sprinkle it before the Lord 7 times in front of the curtain. He is to put some of the blood on the horns of the altar that is before the Lord, in the tent of meeting. The rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offerings at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He shall remove all of the fat from it and burn it on the altar, and do with this bull just as he did with the bull from the sin offering. In this way the priest will make atonement for the community, and they will be forgiven. Then he shall take the bull outside the camp and burn it as he burned the first bull. This is the sin offering for the community. When a leader sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any way of the commands of the Lord his God, when he realizes his guilt and the sin he has committed becomes known, he must bring as his offering a male goat without defect. He is to lay his hand on the goat's head and slaughter it at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his fingers, and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. He shall burn all the fat on the altar as he burned the fat of the fellowship offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for the leader's sin, and he will be forgiven. If any member of the community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, when they realize their guilt and the sin they have committed becomes known, they must bring as their offering for the sin they committed a female goat without defect. They are to lay their hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at that place of the burnt offering. Then the priest is to take some of the blood with his fingers and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. They shall remove all the fat, just as the fat is removed from the fellowship offering, and the priest shall burn it on the altar as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. In this way the priest will make atonement for them, and they will be forgiven. If someone brings a lamb as their sin offering, they are to bring a female without defect. They are to lay their hand on its head and slaughter it for a sin offering at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his fingers and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. They shall remove all the fat, just as fat is removed from the lamb of the fellowship offering, and the priest shall burn it on the altar on top of the food offering presented to the Lord. In this way the priest will make atonement for them for the sin that they have committed, and they will be forgiven. Leviticus 5. If anyone sins because they do not speak up when they hear a public charge to testify regarding something they have seen or learned about, they will be held responsible. If anyone becomes aware that they are guilty, and if they unwittingly touched anything ceremonially unclean, whether the carcass of an unclean animal, wild or domestic, or any unclean creature that moves along the ground, they are unaware that they have become unclean, but they come to realize their guilt, or if they touch human uncleanliness, anything that would make them unclean, even though they are unaware of it, but then they learn of it and realize their guilt. Or if anyone thoughtlessly takes an oath to do anything, whether good or evil, in any matter one must carelessly swear about, even though they are unaware of it, but then they learn of it and realize their guilt. When anyone becomes aware of that guilt, that they are guilty in any of these matters, they must confess in what way they have sinned. And as a penalty for their sin they have committed, they must bring the Lord a female lamb or goat from the flock for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for them for their sin. Anyone who cannot afford a lamb is to bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons to the Lord as a penalty for their sin, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. They are to bring them to the priest, who shall first offer the one for the sin offering. He is to wring its head from its neck, not dividing it completely, and is to splash some of the blood of the sin offering against the side of the altar. The rest of the blood must be drained out of the base, out onto the base of the altar. And it is a sin offering. The priest shall then offer the other as a burnt offering in the prescribed way, and make atonement for them for the sin that they have committed, and they will be forgiven. If, however, they cannot afford 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, they are to bring an offering for their sin, a tenth of an ephah of the finest flour, for a sin offering. They must not put olive oil or incense on it, because it is a sin offering. They are to bring it to the priest, who shall take a handful of it as a memorial portion, and burn it on the altar of the top of the food offering presented to the Lord. It is a sin offering. In this way the priest will make atonement for them for any of these sins that they have committed, and they will be forgiven, and the rest of the offering will belong to the priest, as in the case of the grain offering. The guilt offering. The Lord said to Moses, when anyone is unfaithful to the Lord by sinning unintentionally in regard to any of the Lord's holy things, they are to bring to the Lord as a penalty a ram from the flock, one without defect, and of the proper value in silver, according to the sanctuary shekel. It is a guilt offering. They must make restitution for what they have failed to do in regard to the holy things, pay an additional penalty of a fifth of its value, and give it all to the priest. The priest will make atonement for them with the ram as a guilt offering, and they will be forgiven. If anyone sins and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, even though they do not know it, they are guilty and will be held responsible. They are to bring to the priest as a guilt offering a ram from the flock, one without defect and of proper value. In this way the priest will make atonement for them for the wrong that they have committed unintentionally, and they will be forgiven. It is a guilt offering, and they have been guilty of. They have been guilty of wrongdoing against the Lord. There, Leviticus 4 through 5. Now then, Matthew 24:29 through 51. Again, I ask for clarity of voice and articulation. Father, in Jesus' mighty name, amen. And they all said, amen. Matthew 24:29. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the skies, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the people of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. And heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away. The day and the hour unknown. Matthew 24:36. But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in a field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a hand mill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in the household, to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked, and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time, and then he begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with drunkenness. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces, and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that was Matthew 24:29 through 51, which concludes the Bible with Brisco for today. Tomorrow we will be covering Leviticus 6 through 7 and Matthew 25:1 through 30. Father, I just hope that this was a blessing for you and for those who have tuned in today. I hope that there was clarity enough in my voice. And I also pray that you were blessed. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. And they all said, amen.